On this week's UBC From Here, analyzing tiny specimens with 3D precision.
We're using tomography to look at material science and to look at how materials can be processed and how we can use the 3D structure to improve processing.
The heater taking the rugby world by storm.
No one expected us to be a brand new team and to get as far as we can, so it really shows the commitment and the talent we have on our team and how many players are actually able to play at that level and do well at that level.
And uncovering Canada's aging infrastructure.
And we simply wanted to know what the state of thinking and preparation was amongst municipalities in our country with respect to dealing with the effects of climate change.
Hello and welcome to this week's UBC From Here. My name's Austin Exeni and I'm a second-year management student. Only a handful of 3D X-ray machines exist in Western Canada, and UBC's Okanagan campus happens to house one of them. Now, this powerful unit is being used for researchers in so many ways, from examining health specimens to industrial materials.
This particular equipment is unique in British Columbia. It's probably unique in Western Canada. There are other institutions, other research labs that have similar types of equipment, but there's none yet that can go to such high resolution. The other unique part of our research here is that we're using tomography to look at material science and to look at how materials can be processed and how we can use the 3D structure to improve processing. So this instrument provides us with a unique ability to image materials in ways we couldn't have done before. So we're able to see the intrinsic structure in all three directions. And so that allows us to look at the variations in material structure, that allows us to look at the variations in defects, and that allows us to see things in ways we could never do before. What we're really using the technology to do is to understand how defects in materials are linked back to process, or how the structure is linked to material properties. Right now, we design the wheel of a car for a specific strength. If we know what the variability in material properties is, and if we know how that links back to the process, we could then change our understanding of strength so that we could design the wheel to have different strengths in different parts of the wheel, and then we could reduce the amount of material needed to reduce the overall weight. For me, the most interesting aspect of this research is the idea that we can actually take the 3D structure that we get from tomography, and then we can use that structure to create realistic simulations of how materials actually behave. The technology that we have here has been really embraced by industry. They're very interested in understanding what the 3D structure is in terms of gaining new insight into the process that is used to manufacture materials, and in terms of gaining insight into defects. The future of this research is in two areas. The first area is in increasing speed. Right now it takes anywhere from 10 to about 40 hours to create a 3D picture. And the second area is to image experiments as they're happening in 3D, in what is called in situ or real-time tomography.
Coming off a season with the Heat women's rugby team making the finals and a victory at the Hinson Cup for the men, the Heat rugby program is quickly establishing itself as a strong, growing program.
In terms of developing young individuals and quality people, that's what rugby is about, really. I was approached a few years ago by a couple of very dedicated students who wanted to get rugby going here. So that was the sort of start for rugby here. Since then, it's developed quite a bit.
I've been here since pretty much first started about four years ago or so. Kind of played a role in forming the old UBC rugby club where we just used to play buggers out on the commons.
The CIS, in terms of university sport, is the apex of university sport, so that's where the funding is. Unfortunately, there's no CIS competition for men.
No one expected us to be a brand new team and to get as far as we can, so it really shows the commitment and the talent we have on our team and how many players are actually able to play at that level and do well at that level.
I think we could be competitive now in the CIS, so I'm not saying we would be winning, but we would be in the middle of the pack. And with some earmarked recruiting and some more funds and scholarships for these girls, then we would be competitive there.
Over the past 4 years, it's definitely been improving. I think we've started to make a little bit of a name for ourselves, especially sort of joining into the BCRU and the women making a pass for the CIS. I can't believe over the last 4 years how much it's grown, and I think it's only going to get better with years to come.
We have a tremendous group of passionate players. The key thing, however, with all of this is when you invest in a varsity sport, you do it for a reason. And it's both for developing the name of the university, but also developing the people involved in that program. Rugby involves a larger group of people than most other sports. We're looking at 30 to 40 per team. I really hope to push that agenda, and I think we've taken a lot of steps in the right direction.
My best friend Paul that I met in summer camp, I lost him in the battle of mental health.
My mom was hit by a car on my 18th birthday.
I realized depression runs in my family when my cousin Jack took his own life.
He couldn't find help. It was too late.
After the accident, everything fell apart. I lost control.
I didn't realize I was depressed until it was too late.
I wish he could have found help sooner.
I wish I would have known where to find help.
I'm glad I was able to get help.
Welcome to another edition of UBC's Next Big Thing. I'm Rosemary Jean Thompson. Good to have you with us. My guest today is Kevin Hanna. He's an associate professor of sustainability here at UBC's Okanagan campus. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have you here. We're going to talk a little bit about the adaptation project, which is really about climate change.
Yes.
So tell me what it is.
We are running something called the National Municipal Adaptation Project, which completed a survey quite recently of all local governments in Canada. We sent an invitation to all 3,566 of them. We had a very good response rate, and we simply wanted to know what the state of thinking and preparation was amongst municipalities in our country with respect to dealing with the effects of climate change. In other words, adapting to the effects of
So
climate
whether
change.
the governments of Canada are taking it seriously?
The local governments.
The local governments,
Right.
okay.
And we found out that all of our larger cities, not unsurprisingly, are engaged in the issue, aware of it. They're at different stages with respect to their planning. Some are beginning to think about it. Others, such as Vancouver and Toronto, are well ahead in beginning to prepare and beginning to integrate adaptation into their planning and infrastructure decisions. The real surprise, and I think what concerns me the most, is how many small communities, especially those with a population of 5,000 or less, are either unaware of the issue, not engaged, or just not thinking about this. And that's unfortunate because in many respects they are the most vulnerable places in the country too.
What would be an example of things that our governments, local governments, need to be aware of in regards to climate change that we're already seeing?
I think the most important thing is to understand that things are changing and will continue to change. I'm sometimes asked, well, what does climate change mean for my area, for my community? And I think sometimes the best way of describing it is to say more interesting weather more often. So the 100-year flood may not be the 100-year flood, it might be the 10, 15, or 20-year flood. And that's expensive.
Yes.
And it's better to prepare, even if you're over-prepared, rather than spending an awful lot of money to clean up frequently after the fact.
Now, an example of that is in Calgary, the recent floods.
Yes.
How often have they been flooded?
I think in the last decade, Calgary has experienced 2 exceptional floods. And the most recent one affected many other smaller communities in the region around Calgary, some of which are still reeling from it, and it's hard to say how or if they will recover. We know that the floods that affected southern Saskatchewan and southern Alberta a few years ago, the effects are still being felt in many of those communities, and the disaster response agencies still probably aren't caught up to date with respect to dealing with the claims and the fallout.
Would you say that those communities were prepared?
Well, probably not. You'd have to look at each one on a case-by-case basis. But clearly there's a need, an important need, to think about adaptation and to make the kinds of investments today that will protect us and make our communities, our cities more resilient for these events.
Now, the federal government came out with a new 2014 budget.
Right, yeah.
Good news in regards to adaptation, perhaps?
Indirectly, there's an infrastructure program. It's funded at about $53 billion. This will be the first time that we've had a stable, long-term program to support municipal infrastructure that's been provided by the federal level. And until recently, I think we were the only national government in the developed world that didn't have that kind of program in place. What you have to realize is that only $14 billion of that is new money. And it's extended over a 10-year period. $14 billion would cover some of Toronto's infrastructure deficit. And the minister has also said that there would be an emphasis, and he's used this term, major infrastructure projects. What concerns me about that is that those might be targeted to larger cities and larger centres. And we might find that small town Canada and rural Canada is forgotten. So $14 billion is welcome. And I'm not going to say it's not a good thing. It's nice to see that program put into place, but it's a drop in the bucket when you compare it to what we're really facing in terms of replacing, upgrading, and improving our infrastructure, but also adding that extra capacity to deal with the effects of climate change, which are not 10 or 20 years down the road. They're probably with us right now.
Wow. If somebody wanted to find out more information about your study and your research, they can go online. You have a website?
Absolutely. They can visit us at localadaptation.ca, and local adaptation is all one word.
Kevin, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And that wraps it up for this edition of UBC's Next Big Thing. We'll see you next time.
That's it for this week's UBC From Here. For more stories from UBC's Okanagan campus, visit ubco.tv. I'm Austin Ixeni, and thank you for watching.